I'm 74 years old. I was married to Gerald Hargrove for 40 years. He never hit me. He never cheated. He never raised his voice. And last year I left him. People hear that and they think something terrible must have happened, some betrayal, some breaking point. But nothing happened. That was the problem. For 40 years, nothing happened. And when my doctor told me how many good years I had left, I sat in a parking lot and did the math. It was November of 2022. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of my doctor's office in Fairfax, and I was doing math. Not the kind you think, not money, not prescriptions. Time. My doctor had just told me I had osteoarthritis in both knees and my left hip. Early stage, she said, manageable. But degenerative, that was the word she used, degenerative. And then she said something I haven't stopped hearing since. She looked at me over her glasses and she said, "Vivian, the next 10 years are your most mobile years. Use them well." I sat in that car for I don't know how long, engine off, hands in my lap. November sky the colour of old concrete, and I started counting. If I lived to 85, and that's generous, you see, my mother didn't make it past 78, that gives me 11 years. But not 11 good years. Maybe 8 where I can walk without a cane. Maybe 6 where I can travel by myself. Maybe 4 where my body still feels like something I'm living inside of, instead of something I'm trapped in. And I thought, I'm going to spend those years, where? In that house, with that silence, sitting across the dinner table from a man who hasn't really looked at me in 15 years, eating meals I cook out of habit, watching television shows I don't care about, going to bed at 9:30 because there is nothing left in the day worth staying awake for. That was the day the clock started. Not a metaphorical clock, a real one, the kind that ticks inside your knees and your hips and the small bones in your hands that ache when you try to open a jar. The body keeps time even when the heart refuses to. If you're sitting in a marriage right now, doing the same math I did in that parking lot, counting the years you have left, and wondering if you can afford to spend them like this, I need you to stay with me. Because I spent 40 years not doing that math. And I am here to tell you what it cost. Now, to understand why a doctor's appointment made me leave a 40-year marriage, you have to understand what that marriage looked like from the inside. Not the outside. The outside was fine. We had a house in Fairfax. We had 2 children. Jerry went to work. I went to work at the elementary school library. We paid our bills and mowed our lawn and showed up at church on Sundays looking like a couple who had it figured out. From the outside, we were fine. But I need to take you to 3 moments, just 3, because a marriage doesn't collapse in one afternoon. It erodes. And I can show you the erosion in 3 scenes that I have carried in my body for decades. The first one, September of 1984, our wedding reception. Little community hall in Roanoke. Nothing fancy. Folding chairs, paper tablecloths, my aunt's potato salad sitting in a metal tray. I was 34 years old. which in those days felt like showing up late to a party that was already over. I'd waited so long that I'd started to believe I was the kind of woman who wouldn't be chosen. My younger sister married at 22, my college roommate at 24, and here I was at 34, finally in white, grateful enough to cry during the vows. Jerry stood up to give the toast. Big man, ex-military, not comfortable with words. The kind of man who'd rather build you a bookshelf than tell you he loves you. He held his glass and he said, and I remember this exactly because I've replayed it more times than I can count. He said, "I'm the luckiest man here tonight. I finally have someone to come home to. Not someone he loved, not someone he admired, not me, Vivian, specifically, with my library books and my nervous laugh and the way I always burned the toast. Someone to come home to, a warm house, a filled role." My mother was sitting next to me, Doris. Small woman, Sunday dress, hands that never stopped moving. She squeezed my hand under the table when Jerry said it. Hard. And I've spent 4 decades wondering what that squeeze meant. Was she happy for me? Was she proud? Or was she trying to tell me something she didn't have the words for, because my mother knew what it meant to marry a man who sees a wife instead of a woman? She knew it from the inside of her own 40-year sentence. But I filed it away. I was 34 and chosen. And when you've waited that long, you don't examine the reasons too carefully. You just say thank you. The second moment, 1992, 8 years in. We were hosting a dinner party, 4 couples from the neighborhood, our dining room in Fairfax. I'd cooked for 2 days. Jerry poured the wine. And I was telling a story about something that happened at the school library, a mix-up with the book fair, a whole shipment of wrong books showing up on the wrong day. Funny story. Everyone was laughing. And Jerry, without looking up from his plate, you see, that's the part I still carry. He didn't even lift his eyes. Jerry said, "That's not how it happened. It was a Tuesday, not a Thursday. And you're leaving out the part about the principal." He corrected the date. He corrected the details. He corrected the punchline. In front of 8 people at my own dinner table, with food I'd been cooking since Saturday morning. And everyone laughed at his version. Because Jerry was funny in that quiet, authoritative way that men of his generation could be. Confident, sure. And I laughed too, because what else do? You laugh and you pour more wine and you move on. But I stopped telling stories at parties after that. Not all at once. I didn't make a decision about it. It wasn't dramatic. I just noticed, years later, that I'd gone quiet at our own table. That I'd sit at those dinners and smile and refill glasses and let Jerry talk. And the thing about silence is, once you get used to it, you stop noticing you're in it. It becomes the temperature of the room. You forget there was ever any other temperature. The third moment. And this is the one that still sits in my chest like a stone I swallowed. 1998. Our kitchen. A Tuesday evening I remember because Jerry watched that car show on Tuesdays and the sound of engines was coming from the living room. I'd been thinking about this for weeks, building up the nerve the way you do when you're about to ask for something you're not sure you deserve. I wiped down the counter, I folded the dish towel, and then I said it. Jerry, I've been thinking about taking a writing class at the community college, Tuesday nights. He was reading the newspaper. He didn't put it down. He looked at me over the top of it, the way you'd look at someone who just told you they wanted to learn to juggle, and he said 2 words. What for? Not mean. I need you to understand that. Not angry or dismissive in the way you might think. Genuinely puzzled. He could not imagine why I would want something that didn't serve the household. Something that was just for me. Something that had nothing to do with him, or Claire, or Tommy, or dinner, or the gutters, or the bills. The idea that I might have a life inside my head that needed feeding, that I might be a person with my own hunger, it simply did not occur to Gerald Hargrove. I never brought it up again. And I want you to hear that. I never brought it up again. Not in 25 years. I let 2 words close a door, and I walked away from it. And I told myself it didn't matter. It was just a writing class. It was just a thought. But it wasn't just a thought. It was me, trying to come back to life inside a marriage that had slowly, carefully, without anyone meaning for it to happen, put me away. I wasn't living in that house. I was stored there, like the Christmas ornaments in the attic that come down once a year, like the good china we never used. Present, accounted for, and completely beside the point. Now, I want to be careful here, because if I sit here and tell you Jerry Hargrove was a bad man, that would be a lie. And a comfortable one, because it would let me off the hook for the 40 years I spent choosing silence over honesty. Jerry provided for his family without a single complaint for 4 decades. He was faithful. I believe that completely, and I believe it matters. He mowed that lawn every Saturday morning like it was a holy obligation. He shoveled the driveway before I woke up on snow days so I wouldn't have to walk through the cold. He drove our daughter Claire to college in the fall of 2000 and drove home alone. And when he walked in the door, his eyes were red, though he'd deny it if you held a gun to his head. Jerry was raised by a man who showed love by keeping the lights on. That's what his father taught him. You go to work, you come home, you don't leave. And Jerry did all 3 perfectly for 40 years. He gave me everything he knew how to give. It just wasn't enough, and I didn't know how to tell him that. So I said nothing, and nothing, and nothing, for decades. That's not all his fault. Some of that, a lot of that, is mine. We were 2 people speaking languages the other couldn't hear, and neither of us ever thought to learn. But the price of that silence, you see, silence has a price, and you don't get the bill until it's too late to pay it any other way. The price was that by 2006, I had already disappeared. My mother died that March, Doris Polk, 78 years old. Hospital room in Roanoke with machines beeping and the smell of floor cleaner that I will never forget. I held her hand at the end, the same hand that had squeezed mine under the table at my wedding 22 years before. And I felt the exact moment she left. Jerry drove me home, 2 hours on the highway. I cried the entire way, not delicately, not quietly. The kind of crying where your whole body is involved, where you can't breathe, where you keep making sounds you didn't know you could make. 2 solid hours of that. Jerry drove in silence, both hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. And when we finally pulled into the driveway, our house, the place where I was supposed to feel held, he put the car in park and he said, "She had a good run." That was it. She had a good run. Like my mother was a car that had finally given out. Like grief was a math problem and he'd solved it for me. I looked at Jerry in the driver's seat, this man I'd been married to for 22 years, and I thought, very clearly, for the first time, I am completely alone inside this marriage. I have been alone for years, and the person sitting next to me doesn't even know it. My mother stayed. That's what I keep coming back to. Doris married my father, a hard man, quiet, distant in the same way Jerry was distant, and she stayed in that marriage until the day she died. She stayed because that's what women did. She stayed because she didn't know there was anything else. And she died in the same house, in the same unhappiness, in the same silence she'd been living in for 40 years. Sitting in that car, with Jerry's 3 words still in the air, I realized I was becoming her. Same silence, same house, same slow disappearing. The only difference was, I could still see it happening. Then came our 30th anniversary, September of 2014. I made reservations at the little Italian place in Falls Church, the one where Jerry had proposed back in 1983, back when he used to pull my chair out and ask what I wanted to order. I bought a new blouse, navy blue. I got my hair done. Jerry came home at 6:15, walked past me in the kitchen, sat in his chair, turned on the television. He'd forgotten. Our 30th anniversary, and he'd forgotten. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I picked up my keys, got in the car, and drove to the restaurant alone. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching other couples walk in together. A woman in a red dress laughing at something her husband said. An older pair holding hands across the parking lot. I watched them all go inside, into the warm light, into the place where Jerry once got on one knee and asked me to be his wife. Then I drove home, hung up the navy blouse, got into bed, said nothing. We wasted so much time being married to each other, instead of being honest with each other. 40 years of performing a partnership when neither one of us ever said the thing that might have changed everything. I need more than this. I need you to see me. Months later, I told our daughter about the anniversary. On the phone. I made it light. Oh, you know your father. He'd forget his own funeral. I was laughing when I said it. Claire wasn't. She went quiet. That heavy kind of quiet where you can feel someone deciding whether to finally say the thing they've been holding on to for years. I could hear her breathing. Then she said it. Mom, I spent my 20s in therapy because I thought love was supposed to look like yours. I want you to hear that line the way I heard it, because it didn't land like words. It landed like a hand on my chest. My daughter. My grown, married, 46-year-old daughter told me she almost didn't get married, that she sat in a therapist's office for years trying to unlearn what she'd absorbed growing up in our house. The silence, the way Jerry and I moved around each other like furniture in the same room, the way I shrank and smiled and swallowed everything. Claire watched all of it. She carried it into her 20s. She carried it into her own marriage. She thought that's what love looked like. Two people in the same house, not seeing each other. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone pressed to my ear, and I could not find a single word. Because in that moment, every justification I had ever built, I'm staying for the children, I'm staying because marriage is sacred, I'm staying because 40 years means something, every single one of them collapsed. Staying wasn't noble. It wasn't brave. It wasn't for the children. The children saw everything. They saw me vanish, and they learned that vanishing was what women do. You're still here. And maybe you're here because you've been telling yourself the same thing I told myself for 30 years. That staying is the strong choice. That leaving is selfish. That the children need you together. I need you to hear what my daughter said, because your children see more than you think they do. They are watching you right now, and they are learning what love looks like. And if what they see is silence and smallness, and a woman who has forgotten she's allowed to want things, that is what they will carry into their own lives. That is the inheritance you are building. I know, because I built it, and my daughter had to spend a decade tearing it down. After Claire said what she said, I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I lay in bed next to Jerry, his breathing steady, the way it always was. The man could sleep through anything. And I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about every year. Every single year. What I'd given, what I'd swallowed, what my children had watched me swallow. But I still didn't leave. Not yet. Because knowing you need to go and actually going, those are 2 different countries, and the ocean between them is made of fear. It was February of 2023 when my body made the decision my mind couldn't. A Tuesday. I'd gone to the grocery store, regular trip, bread, milk, the crackers Jerry liked, the kind I didn't. I pulled into the garage, turned off the engine, and I could see the door to the kitchen. White door, same door for 27 years, little scuff mark at the bottom from where Jerry kicked it open when he carried groceries. I knew what was on the other side. I knew it the way you know your own name. Jerry in his recliner, the television on, some news program he'd watch without really watching. The house quiet in that particular way that isn't peaceful, it's just empty. The kitchen I would walk into and unpack these bags and start dinner and set the table and set across from a man who would eat what I cooked and say, "That's good," or say nothing, and then we'd watch television until 9:30 and go to bed and do it all again tomorrow. I could not open the car door. I sat there for 40 minutes, the grocery bag settling in the back seat, the engine ticking as it cooled. The smell of the garage, motor oil, cardboard boxes, that damp concrete smell that garages have in winter. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything, you see. That was the terrifying part. I had run out of feelings about it. There was nothing left. Just a woman sitting in a car in her own garage, unable to walk into her own house. And I understood, sitting there, that I wasn't choosing to stay anymore. I was just failing to leave. And there is a difference. Choosing to stay means you've weighed it, and you've decided, and you're at peace. Failing to leave means you're frozen. You're not staying out of love. You're staying out of habit and fear, and the terrible weight of 40 years pressing down on you like a hand on your chest. I called Marlene that night, my friend Marlene Dunbar. She'd left her own husband at 61, 13 years before, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. Everyone talked about her. I was one of the ones who talked. And now I was calling her at 10 o'clock at night, sitting in the bathroom with the door locked so Jerry wouldn't hear. Marlene didn't give me advice. She didn't tell me to leave or stay. She just asked me one question. She said, "Vivian, when did you stop being scared of leaving and start being scared of staying?" I couldn't answer her. And that was the answer. 4 months I rehearsed it. 4 months of walking through that kitchen door every day, carrying the words inside me like something breakable. I'd start to say it at dinner and then lose my nerve. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and practice the sentences in my head. I wrote it down once on a piece of notebook paper, and then I tore it up and threw it away, because seeing the words on paper made them too real. It was a Sunday evening, June of 2023. Jerry was in the living room. The television was on. I turned it off. He looked up at me, surprised, the way you'd be surprised if the lamp suddenly moved. And I said, "Jerry, I want a divorce." He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He didn't cry. He looked at me, and this is the part I will never forget. He looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture that has suddenly spoken, like the couch had opened its mouth, like the bookshelf had cleared its throat. That is the look he gave me. 40 years of marriage, and in the moment it mattered most, Gerald Hargrove looked at his wife the way you look at an object that isn't supposed to have a voice. Then he said, "After 40 years? Now?" And I said, "That's exactly why, after 40 years." I need to tell you something about Jerry in that moment, because it matters. He was afraid. I could see it. He was 76 years old, and the only life he knew was collapsing in front of him. And he did not have the tools to hold it together or let it go. His hands were shaking. Jerry's hands never shook. And I understood, standing there in our living room with the muted television flickering behind me, that I was not the only person this marriage had failed. Jerry had been lonely too. He just didn't have the word for it. But I could not save him from his loneliness at the cost of what was left of my life. I had done that for 40 years. I had poured myself into the cracks of that man's silence, and every year there was less of me left, and the cracks never filled. I couldn't do it anymore. Not because I stopped caring, because I was almost gone. Tommy called that night, our son. Jerry had called him first. Tommy's voice was tight, the way Jerry's got when he was angry, but wouldn't say so. And he said, and I heard his father's voice coming out of my son's mouth. He said, "You're doing this now, Mum?" Now, that word again. As if time made staying an obligation. As if 40 years of unhappiness earned some kind of loyalty that 50 years of unhappiness would finally satisfy. As if there would ever be a right time for a woman to say, "I've had enough." The weeks after were the hardest, not the loneliness that I expected, the fracture. Tommy stopped calling. He didn't come to Thanksgiving. Claire came every day, sometimes just to sit with me, sometimes to bring groceries, once to help me hang curtains in the apartment I'd rented, small place, 1 bedroom, 7 miles from the house where I'd spent 27 years. That Thanksgiving, I set a table for 1, paper napkin, leftover soup. I sat there and I thought, I chose this. I chose this, and I stand by it. But the empty chair where my son should have been sitting, that was real. You don't leave a marriage without cost. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. I paid for my freedom with my son's silence, and for months I wasn't sure the price was one I could live with. Then I went to see Ruth Callahan. My neighbour for 15 years, her house was 4 doors down from ours. Same street, same builder, same kitchen layout. Ruth was married to Don. Don was like Jerry, quiet, steady, provided, present in body and absent in every other way. Ruth and I used to drink coffee together on weekday mornings and talk about nothing, because we were both afraid to talk about anything. I visited Ruth in March of 2024. I hadn't seen her since I'd left. She opened the door and I almost didn't recognize her. Thinner, smaller somehow, like she was shrinking inside her own clothes. Her hair was grayer. Her eyes, you see, eyes change when a person gives up, and I don't know how to describe it except to say the light was different, dimmer, like someone had turned down a dial behind her face. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table she'd sat at for 10,000 mornings, across from a man who didn't see her. She made tea. Her hands trembled pouring it. And she said, very quietly, looking at the cup and not at me, "I envy you, Vivian. I just can't do what you did." I drove home to my apartment that afternoon, parked the car, and this time, I wanted to go inside. Because every object in that apartment I chose. The blue curtains Claire helped me hang, the small bookshelf I bought at a second-hand store, the coffee mug with the chip in the handle that I picked because it fit my hand. All of it mine, not maintained for someone else, not selected to match someone else's preferences. Mine. Ruth is the reason I'm talking to you right now. Because Ruth is what staying looks like. Ruth is the alternate ending. And I need you to see her, really see her. sitting at that table in a house she's lived in for 40 years, with hands that shake when she pours the tea. And I need you to understand that the thing people call loyalty, the thing they call commitment, the thing they hold up as noble, sometimes that thing is a woman disappearing so slowly that nobody notices until she's gone. People say 40 years to me like it's a reason to stay. You've been together 40 years, Vivian. As if time invested is a reason to keep investing in something that's bankrupt. You wouldn't stay in a house that was falling down around you just because you'd lived there 40 years. You'd grieve it, you'd mourn the years, and you'd walk out the door. Now, I owe you something before I finish, and it's the hardest part. I owe Jerry the truth about my part in this. I was silent when I should have spoken. Not once, for decades. I kept a ledger in my head of every slight, every forgotten anniversary, every what for, and I never showed it to him. I waited for Jerry to read my mind, and when he couldn't, I punished him with a silence he didn't even know he was being punished with. That's not fair. A man can't fix what he doesn't know is broken. I could have left at 50, at 60, at 65. I stayed because I was afraid of being alone, afraid of what people would say, afraid of becoming my mother in the wrong direction. I thought my mother's mistake was staying. Maybe part of her mistake was never speaking. And I made the same one. Jerry is alone in that house now. I don't celebrate that. I grieve it in a way I didn't expect. He didn't deserve 40 years of a wife who was secretly counting the days. Neither of us deserved what we had, but only one of us could see it. And the one who could see it waited too long to speak. The year I turned 70, I started a list. Small green notebook, the kind you buy at the drugstore for $1. I wrote down things I wanted to do. Not grand things, I wasn't planning to climb mountains. Small things. Things that a woman who'd been living for someone else for 4 decades might want to do for herself. Eat dinner at a restaurant alone. That was number 1. Take a train somewhere I've never been. Read a book in a park without checking the time. Buy flowers for my own table. Sleep past 7 on a Saturday. You see what those are? They're not adventures, they're freedoms. The basic, ordinary freedoms of a person who has been allowed to want things. There are 43 items in that notebook now. I've done 11. I'm working on number 12. Learn something new that scares me. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center, Tuesday nights. 25 years late, but I'm there. Last month I visited Marlene at her apartment. She's 72 now, living in a little place in Alexandria with plants in every window and books stacked on every surface. We drank wine, and she said something I've been carrying with me since. She said, "The hardest part isn't leaving, it's forgiving yourself for not leaving sooner." I'm still working on that. I think about my mother sometimes, Doris in that hospital bed. Doris, who stayed in her marriage until the day she died because she didn't know there was another option. I did not have to do the same. And that's not a betrayal of my mother. That's the thing she couldn't finish, finished. The first morning in my apartment, January of 2024. I woke up, and for a moment I didn't know where I was. Small room, light coming through curtains I'd chosen. Quiet, but a different kind of quiet. Not the loaded quiet of a house where two people have stopped trying. Just silence. Clean silence. The kind that doesn't mean anything except that you are alone, and that is all right. I made coffee in a mug I'd picked out myself, blue with a chip on the handle. I sat by the window and looked out at a parking lot. Not a yard, not a garden, a parking lot, and I cried. Not from sadness, from space. For the first time in 40 years, there was space. No one else's expectations pressing against my skin. No one else's silence filling up the room. No one needing me to be less than I was so they could feel like enough. Freedom doesn't feel like happiness at first. It feels like the first morning you wake up and nobody needs you to be smaller than you are. Tommy called last month, first time in almost a year. He said, "I think I understand now, Mum." He didn't say much else, but it's a start. It's not everything, but it's a start. Now listen to me, because I don't have much time, and neither do you, and that's the whole point of everything I've said. If you're 70 and thinking it's too late, it's not. If you're 60 and telling yourself you'll leave when the kids are settled, they're settled enough. If you're 50 and you're sitting in your own garage, unable to walk through your own front door, doing the math I did in that parking lot, listen to me. You have more time than I had. Do not spend it the way I spent mine. Don't wait for the doctor to tell you your body has a deadline before you give yourself permission to live. You don't owe 40 years to a marriage that stopped seeing you. You owe yourself whatever time you have left. I'm 74 years old. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment with blue curtains and a chipped coffee mug and a green notebook with 43 things in it. I'm working on number 12, and for the first time in 40 years, I am not waiting for someone to tell me I'm allowed. If this reached you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not already, subscribe, because these stories aren't finished.